Chris Simon, 30 games, Stomp on Rutu. This wasn't a hit. This was assault with a skate blade. Chris Simon had a long fuse, but when it blew, it was nuclear. In December 2007, after taking a routine hit from Rutu near the bench, Simon didn't drop the gloves or throw a cheap shot. He did something far worse. He looked down, raised his skate, and stomped directly on Rutu's ankle. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't a tangle. It was a calculated act, one that made everyone watching stop breathing. Players, fans, coaches, stunned silent. The NHL dropped the hammer, 30 games. At the time, it was the second longest suspension in league history, and Simon's second massive ban in less than a year. The league had seen elbows, late hits, even stick swings. But using a skate like a weapon, that crossed a line few had ever imagined. The message was clear. This wasn't hockey. This was dangerous. Shane Pinto, 41 games. Proxy betting violation, 2023. This one shocked the modern NHL. Shane Pinto, a rising 22-year-old center for the Ottawa Senators, was handed a 41-game suspension in 2023. And it wasn't for a dirty hit, drug test, or locker room blowup. It was for violating the NHL's gambling policy. At first, the league was vague, only saying the suspension was for activities relating to sports wagering. But behind the scenes, it became clearer. Pinto hadn't bet on NHL games himself. Instead, he had allowed others to place bets using accounts tied to his name, a practice known as proxy betting. The activity took place from a prohibited location, a clear violation of the league's rules, even if he never touched a wager himself. The result? 41 games, one of the longest non-violent suspensions in league history. No criminal charges, no appeal, and no public details from the NHL. Just silence, and a statement saying the case was closed. For a player on the rise, it was a brutal lesson. In today's NHL, where betting ads are everywhere, even the appearance of a gambling link is enough to take you off the ice. And Shane Pinto? He became the first modern NHL player to learn that the hard way. Raffi Torres, 41 games. Hit on Jakob Silfverberg. Raffi Torres wasn't just known for big hits. He was known for the ones that crossed the line, shattered the rules, and left bodies behind. By 2015, his name was practically a walking warning label, and then came the hit that ended it all. It was the preseason. The stakes were low, but Torres came flying in and blindsided Jakob Silfverberg with a brutal, high, late headshot that had no purpose. No hockey play, no puck in sight, just violence. Silfverberg dropped instantly, the crowd gasped, and the league acted. 41 games, the longest suspension for an on-ice act in modern NHL history at that time. But it wasn't just about this hit, it was about all of them. This was strike 5 in a career littered with elbows, headshots, and repeat offenses. The NHL didn't just punish the moment, they punished the pattern. And with that, Torres was done. He never laced up for another NHL game again. A career that once thrived on physicality collapsed under the weight of its own recklessness. Jarred Tinordi, 20 games, PED suspension, 2016. Jarred Tinordi was supposed to be the next great shutdown defenseman, a first-round pick with size, reach, and NHL bloodlines. But from the start, his career felt like it was always one step behind the hype. Bounced between the AHL and NHL, traded, scratched, and struggling to find his place. Tinordi never quite lived up to expectations. Then, in 2016, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons. A failed drug test. The league announced that Tinordi had tested positive for a banned performance-enhancing substance. And just like that, he was suspended 20 games. No injury, no misconduct, just a lab result, and a black mark that would follow him. Tinordi insisted it was accidental, that he had unknowingly taken a contaminated supplement. But the NHL doesn't play games with PEDs. They rarely issue bans like this, so when they do, it means something. Tinordi joined a short, infamous list of players caught breaking a code the league rarely even talks about. For a player still trying to prove he belonged, it wasn't just a suspension. It was a setback he couldn't afford. One more chapter in a career that never quite found its story. Marty McSorley, 23 games, stick swing at Donald Brashear. This wasn't a fight, it was a felony. With just seconds left in a blowout loss in 2000, Marty McSorley lost control. Frustrated and humiliated, he skated up behind Donald Brashear and swung his stick like a baseball bat, cracking him in the side of the head. Brashear collapsed instantly. His helmet flew off, and his head hit the ice with a sickening thud. He suffered a grade 3 concussion and had to be stretchered off the ice. The NHL responded with a 23-game suspension, one of the longest ever at the time. But it didn't end there. McSorley was charged with assault, found guilty, and given a conditional discharge. He never played in the NHL again. Once known as Gretzky's protector, he ended his career with one of the ugliest moments in league history, and a legacy that turned in a single swing. Dale Hunter, 21 games, hit on Pierre Turgeon. The play was over. The puck was in. The Islanders were celebrating a series-clinching goal, but Dale Hunter wasn't done. Just seconds after Pierre Turgeon sealed the game, Hunter came flying in full speed and drilled him from behind, sending him crashing shoulder first into the boards. Turgeon's shoulder was separated. He collapsed to the ice in pain, while the crowd's cheers turned to stunned silence. It wasn't a hockey play. It was retaliation, pure and simple. The NHL responded with a 21-game suspension, the longest for an on-ice act in league history at the time. Hunter had always been known as a tough, emotional leader, but after that hit, he was remembered for one of the dirtiest cheap shots the playoffs had ever seen. Sean Hill, 20 games, first PED suspension in NHL history, 2007. Sean Hill made history, the wrong kind. In 2007, while playing for the New York Islanders, Hill became the first player in NHL history suspended for performance-enhancing drugs. It wasn't just the ban that shocked the league, it was the timing. The news broke just hours before Game 5 of a playoff series against the Buffalo Sabres. Hill was pulled from the lineup with no warning. Suddenly, the headlines weren't about hockey. They were about a scandal the NHL had never dealt with before. A 20-game suspension was handed down immediately. Hill denied knowingly taking anything banned, but the league didn't flinch. The test results were clear, and precedent had to be set. It was a turning point. The NHL had long avoided the PED headlines that haunted other major sports. But this moment made it real. For Hill, it was the beginning of the end. He played a few more games after serving the suspension, but his career never recovered. The legacy? Not his 800-plus games or 200-plus points. Just 3 words. First PED suspension. Todd Bertuzzi, 20 games. Attack on Steve Moore. This wasn't just a suspension, it was a scandal. In 2004, Steve Moore delivered a clean but crushing hit on Canucks captain Marcus Naslund. The league let it go. But Vancouver didn't. Weeks later, Todd Bertuzzi went Vigilante. He skated up behind Moore, sucker punched him, and drove him headfirst into the ice. Moore's neck was broken. His career was over. The league responded with a 20-game suspension, the rest of the season and playoffs. But it didn't stop there. Bertuzzi was charged with assault and later settled a civil lawsuit out of court. The hit didn't just end a career, it became one of the darkest and most debated moments in NHL history. Chris Simon, 25 games, stick to the face of Ryan Hallweg. Yes, Chris Simon is back, and this one might be even worse. In 2007, after taking a clean but heavy hit from Ryan Hallweg, Simon snapped. He got up, grabbed his stick like a weapon, and delivered a vicious two-handed slash straight to Hallweg's face. Hallweg went down bleeding. The crowd was stunned. This wasn't a reckless swing. It was targeted, emotional, and dangerous. The NHL handed Simon a 25-game suspension, the longest for an on-ice act in league history at the time. It should have been a final warning. But for Simon, it was just the beginning of one of the most violent repeat offender records the NHL has ever seen. Tom Wilson, 20 games, hit on Oskar Sundqvist. By 2018, Tom Wilson wasn't just a power forward. He was the NHL's most polarizing hitter. Then came the preseason. In a game that meant nothing, he delivered a headshot to Oskar Sundqvist. Late, high, and completely avoidable. Sundqvist was injured. The hit sparked outrage. The NHL had seen enough. 20 games, one of the longest suspensions in years. Wilson appealed and got it reduced to 14. But the damage to his reputation was done. It wasn't just about one incident. It was the boiling point of a pattern, and the message was clear. Next time, there may not be a second chance. Nate Schmidt, 20 games. PED violation, 2018. In 2018, Vegas defenseman Nate Schmidt was hit with a 20-game suspension after testing positive for a banned substance. The catch? The amount found was microscopic. 7 billionths of a gram, according to Schmidt, who insisted it came from environmental contamination. He fought the ruling, but the NHL didn't budge. The suspension stood. Schmidt served the full 20 games and returned to form. But even for a respected player, the league's first major PED case involving a star left a mark that never fully faded. Jesse Bulleris, 25 games, cross-check to the face. Jesse Bulleris wasn't a star. He was a fringe enforcer, barely hanging onto a roster spot. But in 2007, he earned a permanent place in NHL infamy. After a routine scrum, he viciously cross-checked Ryan Kesler in the face. Stick up, full force. Kesler dropped instantly. No build-up, no reason, just a dirty, reckless play. The NHL responded with a 25-game suspension, tying the record at the time. Bulleris was waived days later and never played another full NHL season. One of the shortest and ugliest careers the league has ever seen. Matt Cook, 17 games, hit on Ryan McDonough. By 2011, Matt Cook was already on thin ice. He'd ended Mark Savard's career with a blindside hit, delivered multiple elbows, and earned a reputation as the league's most dangerous repeat offender. Then came the elbow to Ryan McDonough's head, late, high, and reckless. The NHL came down hard, 10 games plus the entire first round of the playoffs, 17 games total. This time, even the Penguins had seen enough. Cook was benched, forced to publicly apologize, and sent a message: adapt or disappear. The league later cited him directly when rewriting its rules on headshots. Dennis Wideman, 20 games, hit on a linesman. In 2016, Dennis Wideman took a hard hit, skated dazed toward the bench, and out of nowhere, cross-checked linesman Don Henderson from behind. The official collapsed, and the league ruled it was intentional. Wideman was suspended 20 games, one of the harshest punishments ever for contact with an official. He claimed he was concussed and disoriented. The NHLPA appealed, and it was eventually reduced to 10. But the fallout stuck. Wideman's reputation took a hit, and his career was never the same. Tom Lysiak, 20 games, tripping a linesman on purpose. In 1983, Tom Lysiak was a skilled forward, not a goon. But during a face-off, in a moment of pure frustration, he stuck out his leg and deliberately tripped a linesman skating behind him. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't ignored. The NHL hit him with a 20-game suspension, one of the longest ever at the time for abuse of an official. Lysiak never did anything like it again, but that one moment became the lasting headline of his career. Radko Gudas, 10 games, head hit on Mika Zibanejad. By 2016, Radko Gudas had built a reputation as a reckless hitter, powerful, unpredictable, and often right on the edge. But his hit on Mika Zibanejad wasn't borderline. It was late, high, and targeted the head from the start. Zibanejad went down hard. The NHL didn't hesitate. 10 games. They called the hit unnecessary and dangerous, the kind of play they were trying to eliminate. It wasn't the longest suspension of Gudas' career, but it was the one that branded him as a player who couldn't be trusted when the gloves stayed on. And from that point forward, every hit he threw came under the microscope. Ty Domi, 8 games, sucker punch on Ulf Samuelsson. Ty Domi was never afraid to throw hands. But in 1995, he threw the wrong one at the wrong time. Right after a face-off, with no warning and no fight agreed to, Domi sucker punched Ulf Samuelsson in the face, sending him crumpling to the ice. Samuelsson never saw it coming. The punch was so sudden and violent, it shocked even seasoned enforcers. The NHL responded with an 8-game suspension, one of the harshest of the decade for a single punch. It wasn't during a fight, it wasn't retaliation, it was pure rage, delivered at full force. For Domi, a player known for walking the line, this was the night he stomped over it. And for Samuelsson, it was a knockout that no one, including him, ever expected. Chris Pronger, 8 games, stomp on Ryan Kesler. Chris Pronger was a Hall of Famer, a former MVP, and one of the most feared defensemen of his era. But with that dominance came a reputation, and in 2008, it boiled over. During a net front scrum, Kesler fell to the ice, and Pronger, instead of stepping over him, drove his skate blade down onto Kessler's calf. The league reviewed the footage frame by frame. It wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. An 8-game suspension followed, and while that number may seem small today, it was one of the longest ever given to a star player at the time. More shocking? It was Pronger's 8th career suspension. He was a champion, a leader, and a Norris winner. But for many fans, this moment reminded them that even the elite could cross the line. Garrett Ross, 20 games, drugs of abuse policy violation, AHL 2019. While technically an AHL suspension, it's worth noting. In 2019, Garrett Ross was suspended 20 games under the AHL-NHL joint substance abuse policy for use of a drug of abuse. The exact substance was never made public. Ross was a former Blackhawks prospect, But this incident ended his chances at a return to the NHL. The league's message was clear. Even minor league players under NHL jurisdiction were held to the same off-ice standards.